I have the most arrogant grandmother ever. I mean, she's super religious, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the way that she's expressing herself by putting me down for the lifestyle that I live. Guys, I've only scratched the surface of today's story. You have no idea how twisted this grandma really is. It's amazing how a few rude family members can ruin a family event for everybody. Whether they're nosy or rude or plain unpleasant to be around, they always make you want to reconsider attending the event. For the past few years, I've been faced with the same problem. My name is Annalise, and I'm 31 years of age. I'm also unmarried, which is considered a huge problem, as I come from a very conservative and traditional family. You know, the kind that believes they must populate the world with their mediocre offspring, that everyone should be married and at least have 5 kids by the time they're 30. I received a lot of flack from my family after I turned 25, but as I got older and showed no signs of settling down, my parents, aunts, and uncles mostly stopped nagging me about the issue. But there's one person whose criticism has been constant and unrelenting. My grandmother, Dorothea. She's 70 with 7 kids and 20 grandkids. She used to live with her husband in the countryside up until 10 years ago, when she came to help out one of my aunts with a tough birth. She stayed in our town and hasn't left since. Now, our town is small, barely a blip on the radar, and everyone knows everybody, and everyone's extremely religious. There's a large church right in the center of town, and everybody congregates weekly on the Sunday to pray. At least that's how they would like to be known. Most of them meet to gossip and badmouth each other. Anyways, when my grandma settled here, she made it her business to revive and revamp the church, which had fallen into despair in the last few decades. She started evening Bible readings, competitions, and you get the gist. In a few short months, she developed a really religious and devout reputation in town. In my opinion, she's just got more insufferable, that's all. Anyways, I didn't really have a problem with her until she started having problems with me. She had been trying to marry me off since the moment I turned 20 years old, and she's always seemed to have a list of suitors as long as her arm for my parents to choose from. Lucky, I managed to score a scholarship to a state college a few miles away, which included boarding, and my early 20s passed without much fuss. Till then, she was just as annoying inconvenience, and until she's become so much more. After finishing college, I started a job in the same city where I had gone to college. My grandmother had been adamantly against it, telling me that she's been against me going to college in the first place, and that I should be at home now, getting married, minding our farm. She starts to fill my parents' head with this nonsense as well, and my parents, although kind-hearted, were extremely gullible and tended to believe whatever somebody else told them. And so, it happened that when I was 25 years of age, I came home for Thanksgiving, and I'd come 3 days before the actual day and had invited a few of my friends from college over as well. They were going to reach the day before Thanksgiving. My mother had mentioned a few times before that she would like to meet them, so hey, I invited them without even informing her, thinking that she wouldn't mind. No one knew that they would be coming 2 days later, and the day I reached home, we were having dinner when my grandma said that the family had chosen a husband for me from a neighboring town and would be coming over on Thanksgiving to finalize the details. Laughing, I told her I had no intention of getting married, and that she should put all thoughts of the matter out of her mind completely. Well, she just gets so angry about this. She said that family was tired of me disgracing them and that I would not have any choice in the matter. A few of my uncles then dragged me upstairs and locked me in my room. They took my phone, they took my laptop, ensuring I could not contact anyone outside. My grandmother shouted through the door that I was only going to come out after I agreed to sign the marriage documents. I wasn't as weak-willed as to be afraid and give up. I knew that my friends would be coming over soon, and there was always the chance to break the window and jump down from the house's second floor. Although, I was hoping it wouldn't come to that. I didn't fancy a broken arm or leg, and I shouted back that my life was my own, and that she was judgmental old brat, who liked meddling in other people's lives. They left me in the room for the next day and a half, and only opening the door to give me something to eat and drink and asking me whether I've changed my mind. I had not, of course, and said so every time. The day before Thanksgiving, around 6 p.m., I saw my friend's Jeep pulling up, and I had found an old flashlight in my room from back when I used to live there. And using that, I signaled my friends, who were astonished to see me up in the window, and I just wrote the entire situation on paper and threw it down towards them. I wrote that my family members have imprisoned me here and that they are trying to force me to get married. One of my friends called the police, while another banged on the front door asking to see me. Wow. A third opened up his cell phone and starts recording the entire incident. My family initially tried to deny everything, saying that I wasn't even in the house at the moment, and they threatened my friends that they should leave if they didn't want any trouble. Well, the sheriff showed up a few moments later. He was a regular churchgoer and friendly with the family. My grandma initially drew him inside, talking to him in a hushed tone. I watched everything unfold from my window, and the sheriff seemed to side with Grandma. But once my friends threatened to live stream my imprisonment, he relented, telling my family that they need to let me out at once. My grandmother begrudgingly complied and let me out of the room. Angry, she said this wasn't over. I smugly replied that if she didn't apologize to me and beg for my forgiveness right now in front of everyone down below, then I was going to initiate legal proceedings of harassment and kidnapping against her. And not within the town, but within the state, where she had no friends like the sheriff who would pay her any heed. Fuming with anger inside, she did what I asked her to do. So we went downstairs, and in front of everyone she admitted that she was sorry, that it was wrong of her to behave the way that she has, locking me up against my will, and I made a grand show of forgiving her, knowing it would anger her even more, but I didn't care. All I wanted to do was humiliate and hurt her for trying to screw me over. The sheriff left soon after, and my friends waited for me to get the rest of my stuff. My parents, who had initially gone along with the plan, were apologetic for what happened, and apologized for taking part in Grandma's plan in the first place. They said that they caught up in her words and had a momentary lapse in judgment. I knew that they were good people at heart, so I forgave them immediately. The real issue was Grandma. I couldn't believe her recent actions, and I knew this would make her even more mean and angrier than ever. However, I knew that the only way to placate her would be to offer myself up for marriage. And that wasn't going to happen. I was not a sinner by any means, but I wasn't a saint either. And I wasn't going to get married so that she could just appease her consciousness. Update number 1. Anyways, she developed a new way of keeping tabs on me. The next year after New Year's passed, she showed up unannounced on my doorstep, demanding to be let inside. I did so begrudgingly, and she set herself up in my living room, appraising everything with a critical eye. According to her, everything in the apartment was too modern, which meant too vulgar. She announced that she was in the city for a few days with a group of missionaries who were going around school and colleges and spreading God's word. She said that since she didn't know anyone else in the city, and since I was her granddaughter, she would stay with me for the time being. I told her that wasn't an option, as my friends always crashed. I always had a boyfriend who spent the night at my place. In turn, I was also gone for days over at his place, leaving my apartment empty. I knew Grandma would not be thrilled to hear that, and if I brought up a boyfriend, she might even have a heart attack. So I told her that I had roommates and they would be coming over soon. There was no extra place for her to sleep, and she booked a hotel for a few days instead. She starts shrieking about how ungrateful and selfish I was, and that I would say no to family, especially to someone her age who had no idea how to navigate the city. In return, I told her that she was selfish, and that proper manners and etiquette indicated that she called or informed me before coming over to stay at my house. She yelled at me some more and only left once I threatened to call the cops and turn her into a trespasser and harassment. I thought that was the end of things, and I completely forgot about her, and I went on with my life. 2 days later, I come home with my boyfriend. We've been watching a movie and had gone for drinks afterward, and we were pretty tipsy and laughing and having fun back at my apartment. I'd taken my key out to unlock the door, and we were both laughing at how my hands were so clumsy to fit the key into the lock, where there was a gasp of horror behind me. I saw Grandma standing behind us with her hand covering her mouth. Shocked, she asked me who my boyfriend was. Giggling, he introduced himself, putting an arm around me and kissing my cheek. My grandmother looked scandalized. She asked my boyfriend Henry how often he was over, and before I could signal him to be quiet, he told her that he was over all the time, and that we were thinking of moving in together soon. You can imagine the shock on Grandma's face. She asked to speak to me in private, and Henry went inside her apartment, and I stayed outside to chit-chat with her. As expected, she started going on and on about how I disgraced the family once again, and that she should have made sure to marry me off, and she said I was a sinner of the worst type, and that having premarital sex relations was an affront to God. Blah, blah, blah. She said that she would simply narrate the entire incident and everyone in town, so everyone knew what kind of person I've turned out to be. I was too drunk to do anything but just nod along and tell her that I didn't care what she or anyone else thought of me, and that it was too late in the night to listen to her nonsense, saying that I let myself in and shut the door in her face, and she stayed outside for a few more minutes yelling at me through the door that she would make me regret everything I've done, including this incident and the time I humiliated her before. Eventually she left. I was expecting to get a call from my parents in the next few days, thinking that there was no way Grandma had not relayed this entire story to them in exaggeration, morbid detail. Surprisingly, no call came, and my parents did not mention the incident the next time I called and talked to them. In the coming days, I slowly forgot about it. Update number 2. As it turns out, Grandma did not forget the incident so easily. 2 months later, I visited home to celebrate my birthday. I usually didn't do anything for my birthday and spent it at home or with friends in the city, but this time my parents called me multiple times to ask me to spend my birthday with them back in my hometown. I felt bad refusing since I've rarely seen them these days, so I agreed. I was a bit weary of Grandma and the stunt that she pulled last time, so I informed my friends of my whereabouts in advance and packed a taser just in case. The day of my birthday went by without a hitch. You see, my family had pulled out all the stops, inviting uncles and cousins that I've rarely met, and there was also a new face in attendance. My grandmother's sister, Yvonne, who most of the family had not seen before. She lived somewhere in Europe and had not been home in a long time, and she also had a husband, 2 kids, a son and a daughter, who had not come with her, and although she promised to bring them along the next time she visited, and so a large crowd was in the house on my birthday. Even Grandma had been cordial to me and talked to me normally. It was as if she had forgotten the entire incident 2 months ago, or so I thought. I was supposed to cut the birthday cake before dinner, but before that, Grandma asked us to raise our glasses for a toast. We did so, and she cleared her throat. She began by thanking God for blessing her for such a wonderful family, and then she turned to me. Pointing at me, she asked God for forgiveness for raising such a deceitful, selfish granddaughter, and begged his forgiveness for guiding me properly and allowing me to commit such sinful acts as premarital relationship with a man. Everyone around us was astonished. Grandma then threw a bunch of paragraphs on the table in front of everyone, and some photos. Pictures of me and Henry entering my apartment and leaving together. There was one where we were kissing with our arms wrapped around each other. She then said how she had discovered us 2 months ago, and that I had been incredibly nonchalant about committing such a heinous sin. She then lied, saying that she's been calling me repeatedly since then and asking me to come home and repent my sins. But I had not paid her any heed, ignored her calls, and on her last attempt, told her that I liked the lifestyle I live and would not change it for God or anyone else. As expected, the entire family was nonplussed. Judgmental started coming my way. Everybody just starts judging me about my immorality. Grandma then triumphantly said that she knew the solution to the problem. All I had to do was go to church the next church day, confess my sins in front of the congregation, sincerely repent and regret my action, and then ask the mercy from the Lord. Everyone started looking at me condemningly and talking behind their hands. Overwhelmed, I pushed through the crowd, run across the hallway, and upstairs to my room. My grandmother's voice followed me all the way upstairs. She kept telling me not to be stubborn and that there was still time to repent. Once upstairs, I sat on my bed and started to cry. I didn't regret living my life, of course, but I was mad about Grandma embarrassing me like that in front of everyone. I knew she must have been planning this for ages, waiting for the perfect opportunity to present itself. She had effectively ruined my birthday and ensured that I would be talked about everywhere in town, and I knew that the news was sure to spread like wildfire by the next time, since everyone in the family was such a frightful gossip. I was thinking about what to do next, how to go down and face everyone and just counter my grandma's maliciousness when there was a knock at the door. I stood up, opening the door to reveal Yvonne, my grandma's sister. I was very surprised to see her, in fact, and she smiled and asked me if she could come in. I told her of course she could and let her inside. She came in, sat on the bed next to me, and she started the conversation by asking about my life in the city. Surprised, I indulged her, telling her about my job and friends, and then asked about Henry, my boyfriend. I told her we've been together for 6 months and would be moving in together in about a week. She smiled, saying it looked like the relationship was good for me. She then changed the topic and inquired whether her sister, my grandma, was always like that. Puzzled, I asked her what she meant. She said she had not seen her sister in a very long time, and she had been incredibly overbearing and difficult even back when she knew her. She also said that Grandma had always liked poking her nose in other people's business. I laughed and agreed, telling her that she was right. I then narrated the last year's events straight to her. I did, starting from when Grandma tried to get me forcefully married, and her sudden visit to my apartment in the city, and then the events of today. She clucked her teeth and laughed knowingly, saying that Dorothy, my grandmother, was not as virtuous and pristine as she pretended to be. In fact, she reveled. My grandmother had had quite a scandalous life in her own youth, a fact nobody remembered since all that was left of the generation was her and my grandma. I asked her what she meant by that. She smiled secretively and asked what I would be willing to do to humiliate my grandma in turn. I assured her that I was all in and had enough of my grandma and her pretty peddling. She said that she had her revenge to take and would help me in a way that she could. But she said the first thing to do would be to go downstairs and agree with what Grandma said, confessing, repenting in front of everyone. I had to appear contrite, remorseful, and show a bit of sincerity in my emotions so she would fall for it. After all, Yvonne reasoned, the best revenge is taken when your adversary thinks that they've already won. So I took a chance and did as she asked. I went downstairs, putting on my best ashamed face. Everybody was gathered downstairs, still talking about it. Addressing my grandma, I said that after reflecting on what she said, I realized that she's right. She was only looking out for me, simply, and had been doing so all along. She was my elder and knew what was best for me, even though I had difficulty seeing it for myself. I also told her that I agree with her, that I should go to church and confess in front of the entire town, and that God would surely forgive me after my efforts. She seemed a bit taken aback by the sudden change in attitude, but could hardly say anything in front of the people present, as it had been her idea all along. I added that I needed some time to wrap up my life in the city and sever all ties there before returning for good and repenting my sins. I reasoned that making a clean break this way would be easier. Everyone agreed with me and said that it was a great idea, and so we went back to celebrating my birthday. Later that night, Yvonne crept into my room and we hatched our plan. She told me everything about Grandma's youth, starting with her teenage years, and my grandma was 6 years older than Yvonne. But she said she still remembered everything in keen detail, even if Grandma thought that she forgot. Grandma had first started a relationship with a boy when she was 16. They had been in the same choir group and had hit it off as soon as they met. Grandma's parents, my great-grandparents, had been extremely conservative and traditional, just like Grandma was now. They would never have approved of my grandma carrying on with a boy at a young age. She had to sneak out to see him. She had made Yvonne, who was 10 at the time, cover for her and lie about her whereabouts so she could meet her boyfriend in peace. Not even a year later, she started doing drugs and drinking. She had started wearing modern clothing and attending parties to get drunk and have a bit of fun. According to Yvonne, Grandma loved dressing up and taking pictures of herself in those days. She said that she would get me those pictures soon, and I could decide when and where to reveal them to the family. But that, she said, wasn't all. Grandma broke up with her first boyfriend just before she turned 18. Shortly afterward, she had gotten a new man, a tattoo artist. She had fallen in love madly and decided to marry him after knowing him for only a few short months. Of course, her parents had not given her the blessing to do it, so she ran off, causing a scandal, but that wasn't it either, oh no. A few months later, Grandma had reappeared pregnant and with no husband in sight. She refused to tell her family where the husband was. She only said that she was back for good. However, a month before she gave birth, her husband, the guy that she ran off with, showed up on my great-grandparents' doorstep with divorce papers in hand. He said grandmother cheated on him while they were still married, and that the child she was carrying was not his. He said that he was divorcing her and he never wanted to see her again. Grandma's parents had been furious, blaming her for disgracing the family and having a child born from adultery. They had never managed to live down the shame of my grandma running off, and now here she was again, pregnant and without a husband. They threatened to kick her out unless she got rid of the baby, and my grandmother had agreed as soon as she gave birth, had traveled to a town 3 states away, and left the child in an orphanage with the excuse that she could not care for him anymore. Afterward, her parents had found a farmer in a distant town, one where their scandal had not reached, and gotten her married to him. That man had been my grandpa. Grandma had rarely returned to her home, and her parents had barely acknowledged her the rest of her life. In fact, Yvonne concluded Grandma had basically lost touch with her family except Yvonne, who would visit her every 5 or 6 years in the beginning, although they have grown more distant in the past, few decades. I sat there too stunned to speak. To think that my overly religious grandma had led such a life astonished me. It was too much to believe. I asked Yvonne if there was any proof that I could show the family, as no one would believe me without any solid evidence. Everyone would say that I was maligning my grandma, and of course Yvonne replied, there was plenty of proof. The biggest evidence was that she got married once, and she returned to the orphanage where Grandma had left her son and adopted him as her own. Grandma had never known about it, as they had passed him off as Yvonne's husband's son from a previous marriage. She added that she still kept in touch with some extended family from her hometown, and she knew for certain that Grandma's first husband, whom she cheated on, was still alive and well. She told me that I could track him down and ask him to show up and surprise old Grandma and reveal her sordid past, and Yvonne could call her son as well. I agreed, telling her it was a splendid idea and Grandma would never see it coming. Update number 3. The first part of the plan involved feigning contrition in front of everyone. I spent the next week pretending to deeply be ashamed, crying in front of everyone and apologizing to everyone of my past. It was hard not to punch Grandma's smug face whenever she was around, but the thought of her face when I finally had my permanent revenge calmed me down a bit. My confession date was set 2 Sundays from then, giving me and Yvonne ample time to do what was required for our plan. After I returned home, I made plans to travel to Grandma's hometown. I visited Grandma and Yvonne's childhood home, and even found some pictures of them in the attic in storage. Yvonne had already told me that she had pictures of Grandma with her first boyfriend, her first husband, and then of her pregnant and with her son when she gave birth. I also found a few photos of her drinking and one where she was smoking a cigarette. My next stop was to find my grandma's husband. To my surprise, he was married and had grandkids of his own. He was taken aback when I knocked on his door and introduced myself. Once I told him my situation, he was simply happy to help. He had been greatly hurt by my grandma's actions and behavior towards him, and got angry on my behalf once I told him how pretentious and evil she was even now. He agreed to help me in my quest for revenge and promised to show up on the day everyone was gathered in the church. Update number 4. The day before I was going to leave for my grandma's hometown, I got a call from Yvonne. She said that she had told her son everything and that she wasn't his real mother but his aunt. Her son had initially been sad at the thought of being abandoned but assured her that she was the best mom he could have ever asked for. She was taking the next flight to the States with him and would reach there around the same time I would. With everything set and going according to plan, I headed home. I spent the next day paying heed to my grandma's sage advice and barbered insults. And then Sunday arrived. As expected, word had gotten out about the proceedings of the day, and everyone showed up to see me get humiliated. At noon, I walked into the church with my grandma's first husband, Tyson, and Yvonne's son, Peter, behind me. I stood before the congregation and told everyone about Grandma's past. As my story progressed, Yvonne distributed photos that we had of Grandma among everyone present so they could see for themselves what she was really like. When I got to the part where she cheated on her husband, Tyson introduced himself, telling everyone that Grandma had fallen as quickly out of love with him as she fell in love with him. It had more to do with the fact that he wasn't as rich as she had thought, and she had found life with him boring. That's how materialistic she was. Then Yvonne came up, detailing Grandma's pregnancy and how she had a kid out of wedlock, and had then given him up without a thought. She then proudly introduced her son, saying that fortune had favored her and that Grandma did not know what a gem she had lost. At this, Grandma jumped up, saying that we were liars, and I gave the documents confirming Peter's arrival at the orphanage, his parents' name, and of course a copy of his adoption papers. She fell silent, and the church was buzzing with conversation, with shock, and everybody was appalled at what Grandma had turned out to be. I told everyone then that how Grandma was a hypocrite, how she had, in her own words, been the ultimate sinner when she was young, and was now just maligning me and insulting me and the lifestyle every chance she got. Some of the old ladies there started agreeing with me, mentioning how Grandma should have looked at her own life before throwing stones at someone else. Grandma then got up and stormed out. I followed her outside, and I didn't even want to gloat, really. I just wanted to see the utter defeat in her eyes. She was running towards our house, and I followed her inside. She went upstairs and started packing, and I stood there in the doorway, feeling a sense of elation. Without a single word to me, she packed her suitcase, and then she walked out of the house. She walked to the bus station and got on the next bus, and later I found out that she's gone back to her husband in the countryside. To this day, she hasn't returned to the town or contacted anyone in the family, and I have a feeling that she never will again. So, it looks like this grandmother was never expecting to be put on blast like that. I mean, what a two-timing, two-faced hypocrite. She's judging OP for the way that OP lives her life, and this whole time, Grandma, back in her heyday, was painting the town red. I mean, some of the things that she was involved with could arguably be way worse than OP. I want to know your thoughts about this one, where you guys lie with it, and just the thoughts about the judgmental grandmother. I want to know your thoughts. Guys, my name's Mr. Reddito, and if you're new to the channel, I want to thank you for joining me on the video, and if you like these sort of things, just know I drop a new video every day. You can find my other channels as well in the description below. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I'll see you tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.